It's the 24th of January, 2023. I gotta think about it now. It's still January, so it's easy to say 2022. I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist, and the nuclear industry calls me the Gamma Goat for some reason. You can call me at 709-589-4406. Just ask for the Gamma Goat. Lots of scumbags today. Evil mothers for nuclear is just a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent of how kooky this industry actually is. So if you're at a nuclear power plant and they ever ask you to wear a tungsten vest, kick them in the nuts and say, Dana sent me, and get out of there. These are things you don't want your children to grow up and do. Don't wear a tungsten vest. Don't go to nuclear sites. If you do, accidentally get jacked and they put you in a paper suit and then offers you a tungsten vest. Call your loved ones and tell them you loved them. Unless you're with the nuclear industry, then you got to call the demons and the devils. Why are they so evil? Why is United Nations so unbelievably, relentlessly? They haven't done a single good thing. All they do is, what's the evilest way we could do this? And you sure that's the evilest, absolute evilest way we can do it? Yeah, boss. Okay, let's do it. Raphael Grossi, an insignificant creep who all of a sudden had an opportunity to be as evil as he possibly dreamed he could be. The International Atomic Energy Agency doesn't regulate the depleted uranium munitions, I might add. A-10 Warthog shoots a ton and a half a minute. A ton and a half a minute. That's a lot. It's equal to 44. It's equal to 44,000 Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. We can't turn to journalists. They're the ones that got us in this mess in the first place. They refused to hold the most evilest of society accountable or even acknowledge it. Instead, they done the opposite. They actually told blatant lies and sat in silence. They're growing food they never stopped growing it after Fukushima, right alongside of the nuclear meltdown, in a no-go zone, incredible radioactive zone, alongside of thousands and thousands of one-ton bags of radiation. This is a spot where you shouldn't walk past. You don't grow food there. And they're notorious for it. Like, you're missing out. If you don't understand the big picture, you're missing out. This is a genocide machine. Just eating one meal at this can mean you can get sick for the rest of your life. And that means incredible vicious for your loved ones and your children in particular. That's the stumper of Reactor 3 in Japan was a mixed oxide fuel facility. This is why you don't want mixed oxide. It burns around 200,000 degrees hotter when it detonates. This is the stumper of Reactor 4. And both of those buildings, they had 2 fuel pools each. At the top of the buildings, they're gone also, which was decades of reactor cores. That's just 2 of 4 buildings we got confirmed. Now they deny Reactor 4 melted down. Because, hey, they're pretending, this Rupert Winfield Hayes from the BBC, pretending he's in a building that actually doesn't exist. It's a very, very sadistic, and this kind of lies and deceit and dishonesty has been going on a long time. This is Amanda Lang here in Canada, and she's got this GMO child activist on the show because an adult will rip them apart, right? So they bring this child activist and they say, we can't label GMO because people will become complacent. But I might want to remind everybody there's over 300 ingredients that are labeled on your food so you don't accidentally, like say if you're allergic to nuts, you know. I'm going to play this clip, and it didn't make any sense what she said, so I played it backwards. And it actually made it sense, but not in a really good way. Just listen to it. I'll do it a couple of times for you.
One danger that you'd face is we would just become immune to that label. We would accept that it's everywhere.
I can't distinguish 100%. It says, we are magic people. Imagine magic to do this. And I don't know, so listen to it a couple of times to see if you can figure it out later.
One danger that you'd face is we would just become immune to that label. We would accept that it's everywhere.
Last time.
One danger that you'd face is we would just become immune to that label. We would accept that it's everywhere.
We imagine you're mocking to do this. We are noble or something at the end of it, right? We are magic people, it starts off with when you plays it backwards. It's actually a coherent sentence if you can... I just thought it was really interesting, and that's the only clip in my life I ever played backwards. Once I heard that, I was like, I'll never do that again. If you start taking their articles and playing them backwards, I wonder what happens. You got to appreciate grammar, and a lot of people don't have perfect grammar. In fact, very few people will have perfect grammar. But grammar is a weapon. But in school, you're taught grammar, but you don't usually absorb it, right? But your subconscious does. So it's a subconscious thing that you do. Let's get after it. It ain't going to get done on its own. We got a poll. Let's start off with that. Should countries that are importing Fukushima deadly radioactive foods have referendums before they import it into their country? Doesn't that make sense? How could that be a bad thing, see? Should countries that are importing Fukushima deadly radioactive food have referendums in the countries, like Taiwan done? But in Taiwan, the referendum is only binding for 2 years. Radiation lasts for millions of years. So 2 years later, instead of having another referendum, the bought and paid for politician decided to do it with a shake of a hand and leave the country out of the equation. With a country now like Japan, they've done that with Japan to import Fukushima food, so they can join the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So the big corporations can save money with the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Organization. They said, well, we'll flood our supermarkets and schools and corner stores and restaurants with deadly food if you let us join. That's what Japan said, we'll let you join if you do that. And so they changed the laws so that they can join the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So, if you think you live in a normal world, you're sadly mistaken. I wish I could go back to the world where I was innocent and didn't know any of this. Not really, I suppose, but like say selectively, if you ever switch it on and off, put a little switch in your head and go, I'm going to forget everything for a while. Just go back to sucking my thumb. Greta Thunberg and nuclear power. Now, Greta is not too knowledgeable, see? And so the media understands she might never obtain that articulation of it. And so they put her on a pedestal. because they want to control the kids. They've always been asphyxiated with the children, the industry and authorities. So the nuclear industry has infiltrated all of your schools and taken over all of your universities. Now the guy who wrote it, as far as I can tell, that's him there. It's really difficult to get a picture of him. And I've done a lot of looking, and this is what I'm assuming is, he's a despicable, subhuman person. I wanted to get a picture. Andrew Kinney is his name. You see what I mean? It's really disgusting. Almost everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong at Fukushima. Diachi. The crucial fact of the awful accident was nobody was harmed by radiation. So this is an absurd suggestion. And I hate doing it for some reason lately, constantly digging up the documentation and just instead of just telling the story. I don't hate it. It's just a lot of work for Dana, that's all. And I'm just not feeling good, right? And so it's difficult for me when I'm not on top of my game to constantly dig up the documentation. Okay, so the best way I got to explain it is heart attacks, not cancer, which is what you're fed 24/7. That radiation is from nuclear sites could cause cancer. They're very, very vague when you talk about it. Extreme increase in mortality by cardiac diseases, and the death rates might give the creeps to some people. The deaths were up 12.5% for a single month, which translated into 12,700 extra people dying of heart attacks in a single month in the nuclear wasteland. That's extraordinary. And it's not just heart attacks that they died of, by the way, as you can see, right? So when someone suggests that nobody was harmed, 6 in 10 Fukushima children with diabetes is not harmed, Andrew? What's wrong with you? And I understand you come from an impoverished country, and this is probably the only job you can get was being a scumbag, because it's natural probably to his family and himself. People did die of panic, said the scumbag, and heart attacks, and I showed you that he died of heart attacks. There was spikes of up to 12,000, and this is why he mentioned it, see? And it's common knowledge, by the way, that in the industry, people die of heart attacks quite quickly when they're poisoned or consuming radioactive food, including children. And no one died of panic. What they're alluding to was 3,000 people had to be taken, that evacuated, died. They blamed it on the evacuation. And so when I look at it, I can give you examples of hurricanes and typhoons and cyclones where they evacuated millions of people. And we've never heard tell of statistics like with Fukushima. It's a despicable industry. In order to cause that many people to die, you had to poison it a lot. And there's 1,800 diseases. This is why we got a referendum. Should countries that are importing Fukushima deadly radioactive food have referendums on it before they import it? Which one would hopefully know good from bad, right? We got Michael Chill calling in from Ontario, from nuclear wasteland.
Yep.
Hi, Mike. Go ahead.
Hi, Dana. So I want to refresh my memory. When you said after my last call about the new Canadian regulations regarding 2 drinks per week for alcohol.
Yeah.
after I hung up, you said, did they get a meltdown?
Right.
And I think you're on point on this.
Did they have an event, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that's an extreme government warning.
The government is supposed to be our employees. Instead, they're trying to be our nannies and their ninnies.
Well, they want to get away from any type of problems. So when they say something like this sends a very clear warning, but we don't understand what the warning is.
Is there something else? Are they doing this with other stuff too? I don't know. Maybe beer is good for you, and that's why or alcohol is good for you, and they don't want you to drink it, right? Because if alcohol turned out, there was a study showed up that actually alcohol is super good for you, and it helps you get rid of radiation, then they would definitely say, don't drink the alcohol. You know, when you look at and I showed that, the numbers that on last night, the CANDU reactors are releasing into the lakes up there, the fresh water.
Yeah, I watched that. I really appreciated that you did that.
That's stunning numbers, see? That's frightening.
That's the water we drink out of our taps.
Yeah, and where they release it is right alongside of where the intakes are to, for the major cities like yours and that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard nothing. We do know they're not going to use the phone system to warn you or sirens if you do have a release. It's never going to happen. Because you've had many releases, many accidents since 3 Mile Island, which is why they have sirens around nuclear power plants in North America. And they've never used the sirens. And when they did use them, they said it was an accident, right? You remember last year, Ontario, was it the Darlington or the Pickering? I think it was the Darlington. Allegedly sent out text, well, not allegedly, sent out text messages on a Sunday morning around 7 a.m. to around several million people that there was an event at the nuclear plant and shelter and stuff like this was. And then they came out a few hours, it took them about an hour or something to come out and to try to redact it. And that definitely, right, you know. So back in they had a major release a number of times where they waited at least 2 years before they mention it. And
do you think it's connected to Darlington?
I don't know. Right, just suggesting alcohol alone doesn't. Well, it's winter.
Well, they want to stay as far away. If they were insurance people, they want to stay as far away from paying people who actually pay the insurance every month. They will never say Fukushima.
No, I got no. I can't. I don't have anything to tie it to, right? So we'll let it go with that, I guess.
It's big, though. It's a big story.
It is. It's weird. I thought about it after, how weird the story actually is. Okay, Mike, is there anything else you want to throw out there? It's not my best night for this stuff, and we're just going to try to get through the show we got. Okay, thank you.
I'll keep watching, and hi all in chat, and hi James.
Yeah.
I like to say hi James because
Sure.
He's on point.
No, absolutely. He's got a couple of good poems lately too. I grabbed. Okay, take care, Mike. Yeah, good night. Yeah, Ontario's a bad spot to live, man. They've had serious, like their limits each year is in the trillions. That's legal. In terabecquerels. And we're talking like multiple millions of trillions of atoms is legal because they said it was. Like 44,000 becquerels per liter is legal in the Great Lakes because after the big accident that they had, but it's not legal. Like Europe was 15 becquerels a liter. California was 20 becquerels a liter. Going up to 44,000 becquerels a liter That meant you were supposed to evacuate Toronto with multiple millions of people. And instead of doing that, they just raised the limit to accommodate the poisoning of the population. So the industry has no right to exist. It abrogated every right it ever had, and just by doing something like that. And the Canadian nuclear regulatory agencies were the ones that done it. So there is no regulatory. That's what I mean when I talk about capture regulatory agencies. They're controlled opposition. Their job is to poison you, not to help you. Is to promote the nuclear industry, not to hold it accountable. But the casualties from the radiation were zero, he said. I really despise these types of people, like Kennedy, Andrew Kinney. He's a certified scum. The action, regrettable though it was a stunning vindication of the safety of the nuclear power, and was acknowledged as such by the ultra-green environmentalist George Monbiot. And I was wondering, I was like, where did I hear that narrative? And when he said George Monbiot, who had said that was George Monbiot's actual words, is what he's using, folks. So he's saying there's no releases, the building's perfectly intact, that it looks like this, that it doesn't look like that, that it doesn't look like that. And these are reactor buildings. These are significant. These are very significant. The nuclear industry, if you try to talk to them, this is what you end up with. That's what you end up with every single time. Let's keep going here because... But the brutal lies, eh? Nuclear has the least waste problem. Its waste is small. Well, if you take a pound of nuclear waste and put it at a subway, it'll kill everybody that walks past it for 1,000,000 years. If you take a Dixie cup, a tiny, like a 1/3 of a coffee cup, a Dixie cup is typically like an ice cream container. It's very short, but it's about the same width as a typical glass or cup. You call them Dixie cups on the East Coast there. If you took something like that and put it in McDonald's, you can fill up McDonald's with a couple of hundred people every 20 minutes. It'll kill them. It'll do that forever. In fact, if you take a pound of it, you can have every human on the planet walk past it, they'll die. You can have every animal on the planet walk past it, it'll die. You can put it on a spaceship, take it to another planet with a similar population of planet Earth, and all of them will die if you can get them to walk past it. That's a pound of it. And a pound of it, and the amount of atoms on top of that, if they're released into the environment, the fuel rods are still splitting the atoms, remember? You got 1,000 fuel pools worldwide, full of fission fuel rods that are splitting the atoms into your environment. These are invisible plumes. It'd be the equivalent of a snowstorm covering your whole planet in 20 days and never stopping. That's what radiation is, except it's not cold, it's pure energy. And if it infiltrates your body through consumption, through showers, through laundry, just doing the dishes, from rain, from eating it, from breathing it, many different ways, your body will attack it with white blood cells for the rest of your life, compromising your immune system. If you're in the environment where you're constantly eating it, because your supermarkets have been purposely poisoned by the nuclear industry, which is what Japan's job apparently is, to saturate every country with deadly food that you can't perceive. Nuclear does reduce CO2 emissions, but it doesn't. It's using 2 external power supplies. Gas, oil, and coal plants are dedicated to it, at least 2 of them, sometimes 3. But there is no climate crisis. Of course there's a climate crisis. It was caused by the nuclear industry from 80 years of emissions into the environment. me give you an example. This is a 19-day plume. It's just one of endless models. So that's 19 days in this section here, 468 hours, 19.5 days of radioactive fallout. Covers the whole planet. So every bird, every insect, the children, where they're short and they're close to the surface, the radiation is pulsing down there at the speed of light. And so they're getting full body x-rays because all the gammas, the alphas, the neutrons, the betas don't mingle. And when they hit each other, they change direction at the speed of light. It's just shy of the speed of light. So gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas are pulsing energy every second. Some of them could be pulsing 50 or 100 feet. And with so much fallout, there's no way that you're not getting a full body x-ray of all species. This is why we're seeing an extinction event over the last decade play out. Research team awarded $2.4 million. And he's got multiple studies under his belt of these kinds of numbers, by the way. And he studies gut bacteria and stuff like this at the Tennessee Health Science Center to develop medical countermeasures to treat gastrointestinal acute radiation syndrome, which you can get from radiation therapy in a hospital, right? So the proton beams or the injections they're giving in the hospital will also have these lethal side effects. Now he's looking at it through the context of nuclear accidents. Radiation exposure to large-scale nuclear incidents is a global concern. So the elite are going to spend whatever it takes to try to come up with a solution to protect them, and that's what you see happening right there in that study. Welcome to the well-thought-out nuclear genocide machine. Here's another study from 2016. There was another study from 2019 where similar to his was $5 million or something. So he's one of the rare ones where he's dedicated to the intestines, and which is an absurd amount of different types of germs and bacteria that are good for you live in your intestines, right? 20 million tons of radioactive waste is stored in the open by a French company. So if you're going to create incredible plumes when you store it out in the open. Now France, let me get back on. France, France, the French are, they had the French Polynesian Islands. What do we got going on here? Oh, I continued, did it? That's okay, I smurfed it up. I thought I split that one. 20 million tons of radioactive waste stored in the open by a French country, a Nigerian subsidy of Orano, which is formerly Areva, which went bankrupt in France, but there is a Canadian-American Areva. So you see how they work that? They have different... Now, the Areva in France was the government. That's the same here. So they only went bankrupt, and they were responsible for storage of the fuel rods for 1 million years. So instead of owing up to the responsibilities, they went bankrupt. Has operated and opened up... Orano has operated a uranium mine in the Sahara. So in Niger, what they had done was they created a civil war that displaced everybody in the country permanently. And with these types of civil wars, incredible heartbreak, starvation, murder, genocides, and everything else for 60 years. And the idea was that Niger had a huge stockpile in the earth of high-grade uranium ore. Very high-grade yellow cake when it came out. And because there's no environmental protection laws over there, they just dumped it in the open and walked away from it last year. Now, That's how France gets its cheap uranium to run its reactors. And then it takes it to a different type of evilness, because if that's not evil enough, I don't know what is. Then they decide that they're just going to recycle this highly enriched uranium fuel when it comes out of the reactor into MOX fuel. And a large percentage of the French reactors run on mixed, say, 1/3 MOX fuel. And the process of which is illegal in Canada and the United States, but there is 2 private companies in the United States that do it. Private companies. It's illegal for the government to do it, I guess. And say United Kingdom and France, like the La Hague in France, it's so dangerous to have 500 security guards in a 24-hour cycle. 500 security guards. So the whole story is absurd anyway. So they also contaminated everybody in the French Polynesian islands, where they have what's known as jellied babies, which is similar to Christmas Island and the Marshall Islands. Roughly 20 million tons of deadly radioactive waste produced over the last 4 decades is threatening the lives of those in the near vicinity. Well, there's no containment, so. And of course, you're in a desert area, very dry conditions. You're going to liberate that into the environment, which means you're going to pollute all the water tables and all the lakes too, right? Uncontained waste, and you just walked away from it because there's no environmental protection agencies to hold them accountable. The situation was completely unacceptable. It's about 20 million tons. Well, 20 million tons is a couple of rows of 1-ton trucks around the planet, bumper to bumper. It's absurd amount we're talking about. And it's already in the groundwater. Pakistan's nuclear program safest. Pakistan is the safest. They're like India, where they got streets and streets of disfigured children from dumping it into the fresh water years in its infancy and during the legacy waste of it, right? And when they were doing their nuclear war, they call it nuclear testing. It's the same radioactivity. It's the same nuclear weapons. And therefore you have to contaminate. Somebody got to get contaminated. It's absurd. Chaos everywhere in Pakistan. In fact, Pakistan is considering, I don't know if it's true or not, but what they're claiming is Pakistan is considering selling their nuclear assets. They sell its nuclear assets to stabilize its economy. Last week we covered a story where the slaves had asked the question, how do we eat nuclear weapons because we're starving to death? And all we got, the government has blown all of its money on nuclear weapons. So, again, we see this filthy scumbag weapons for production factories are. They can't survive without misery. That's their money. That's how they make their money: rape and murder, and destruction and victimization of everybody. That's how they make a living. And so they attract some real degenerate scumbags, and they get a lot of money for working in that environment. And so they have degenerate little scumbags that grow up and work there. And after generations of it, we might not have a planet anymore. Not to worry, NASA is going to get us to the solar system. Well, us being girls, not men. Men can't travel in space. They go blind after 2 years. So men won't be going to the moon. If they do, they'll be blind within 2 years, according to the experts. A novel propulsion system would hurl hypervelocity pellets at a spacecraft to speed it up. That's kind of what it looks like. We're all going to go off into space and everything will be good. Don't worry about it, Dana. This has been on the drawing board before. Only females can travel in space, which is probably the only good news you're going to hear for a couple of years around here. Let's see what other bad news they're going to feed us. Might as well put my big noggin in there. Today, multiple space agencies are investigating cutting-edge propulsion ideas that will allow for rapid transit to other bodies in the solar system. Like, anybody who believes the friggin' word that comes out of NASA is pretty bloody gullible. Bless your hearts. You poor things. They could enable transit time to Mars in 100 days, or even 45, or maybe 44. And a nuclear-powered Chinese spacecraft that could explore Neptune. Haven't you got to go to the moon first? I'm just not trying to be an a-hole. I'm just asking, right? Well, yeah, we already been to the moon, Dana. Yeah, you already been to Mars too, moron. How much did they screw me out of last night? They're adding at least 6 seconds to all of my videos. Once the video, 12 hours later, the comments will finally show up, and my videos will be at least 6 seconds longer, or in some cases, 5 minutes shorter. Russia TV warns new beak wars coming after after Putin's ultimatum. I'll try to get back on track here. I gotta try to get back. It'll be the only birds you'll see for a long time. That's the only flock of birds I've seen now in the last 7 years of research. Fukushima has exterminated most of the species. You can go into communities, you'll find some birds. But when you go out into nature, there's zero possibility you're going to see a flock of birds out in nature. A Russia state TV host and editor-in-chief of the state-sponsored RT, who years ago, about 8, 9 years ago, wanted me to do a show on RT, I told him, get lost, had said that a beak war is set to commence by the end of the winter, following ultimatums made by Russia. And, you know, back then I had a lot of universities used to end up in my comments section and complain to the viewers that I won't take their scientists, I won't take their academic papers, that I wouldn't take their money, I wouldn't take their podcasting equipment, I wouldn't take and interview their guests. There was multiple universities were very, very upset with me that I wouldn't take their equipment. And the way I seen it was that if I first off, if I start doing stuff like that, I'm a scumbag. Second off, now I'm beholden to a university, and if you pull the plug on me, everybody walks away. Third off, they're the last people I'd be trusting on the entire planet, and I told them that in no uncertain terms. But that didn't stop them from harassing me for about 1.5 years or so, and trying to make me look like a bad guy because I wouldn't take I didn't need their academic studies. I have no problem finding what I want on my own. And think about a university, they don't have, they'll spend, say, $1 million on studies that they'll rent them from Elsevier, Springer, or Wiley, which are the 3 biggest journals on the planet. They actually have 28,000 journals between the 3 of them. And even when I was coming in from the research expeditions, they were going to publish some of my research, but they wanted the exclusives to it, so it gets locked behind a paywall. I couldn't even show it to you. The idea was to do the research, put the documentation up on my website, and it was free for everybody worldwide. Nobody can deny that it existed. It's still there today. And everybody's denying that it exists, except for the people that are familiar with me, obviously. But the rest of the world refuses to acknowledge the facts. And now we know why, because after all these years, we realized there is no media, there is no universities. This is the industry It's captured all of it in increments over decades. A Russian state TV host, editor-in-chief of the state-sponsored RT, said the big war is set to commence by the end of winter, which is RT is funded by the Russian government, following ultimatums by Russia. Now, what's going on is countries are sending long-range weapons, NATO countries, to Ukraine. And the weapons are designed to reach Russia. So Russia doesn't mind going in and flattening a country, or America, or Britain, or anybody else, or France. What they don't want is a country that can fire back at them, because the population will get involved now, right? And call for reality. And so this is why they fight these long-distance wars. And so why shouldn't the country that you're invading fire back at you? Like, look at what North Korea has done to the rest of the world for the last 70 years. They've done nothing. But for 70 years, everybody's convinced by endless media all day, every day, and Hollywood and everything else, that North Korea is going to get you. Now, North Korea is surrounded by nuclear weapons. Excuse me. That's the best damn cup of tea I had since the show started, Dana. So I got a sensible poll. It's actually probably one of the most important polls I've ever put up. Should countries that are importing Fukushima deadly radioactive food have referendums on it before they do that? You don't have to be a genius to understand that that's actually what you should be doing, right? And we got almost 100% of reality. Suggests the conflict between Russia, the West, and Ukraine may escalate if Putin's demands are not met. Yeah, but it's a war. That's how a war works, isn't it? Russian state TV discussed the best strategies to be used against the U.S., which includes the idea for killing scores of Americans, or killing everybody except for Tucker Carlson. The world has finally lost its mind. Russia has repeatedly made the unproven claim that one of the reasons for the war is to fight against neo-Nazis in Ukraine. No, that was what they originally said. They were saying that when they invaded Chernobyl. Because we covered it. They're calling America's biolabs, there's a dozen of them or so, in Ukraine. That's what they're describing as the neo-Nazis, these particular people. And they're right. Sheffield peace campaigners urges city council to take action on UN, which is not supposed to exist, by the way. We can do our own nuclear weapons treaty ban. We don't need UN. Nobody needs UN or any of their thousands of subsidies companies like UNICEF, and the World Health Organization, and UNSCLEAR, and IRPA, and the IPCC, the IAEA. We don't need a corporation telling every country worldwide how to think, how to eat, what to get shot into their bodies, and everything else. Why would we do that? How do we get that stupid? What's the point of having a country if you're going to have a foreign mercenary military industrial complex known as UN, which is 195 militaries, dictating to you every facet of your life? And they are. Your rules and regulations are based on the United Nations. Think of the United Nations as a think tank. Then you start to understand realities. They don't have no authority for any country. What they do is they corrupt government agencies, or they put corrupt people in government agencies, and then they utilize that to change legislation to accommodate their think tank of world domination. And they're very, 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 very successful. But that don't mean we shouldn't recognize evil for what it is. We can attack them with the RICO laws. They are a criminal organization. That's easy to prove. This is not an opinion. Sheffield peace campaigners urge the city council to take action on UN nuclear weapons ban treaty. I wish that people like this would look at Fukushima, would look at nuclear power plants and see the carnage from the constant emissions. There's 1,800 diseases, not just cancer. But you see, all of these organizations, the media will put them on a pedestal, see? Because the weapons ban treaty is not signed by any country with nuclear weapons. It's just another way of strangling countries from manufacturing weapons to keep evil at bay. Because that's the world we live in now. If you don't have nuclear weapons, you can't keep evil at bay. And to have nuclear weapons, you got to be evil. And you can't have weapons without polluting the entire population. Can't join the Trans-Pacific Partnership without poisoning your population too. For food from a nuclear wasteland. Sheffield's Creative Action for Peace, scrap, taking action to mark the second anniversary of the UN Treaty and the Prohibition. See, every time I hear the word UN, I don't understand how come people can't do things on their own. Why are you... This organization, UN, look at their subsidy companies and the harms and carnage, and legacy of carnage that they have taken up on our planet. It's absurd. It's absurd to look to UN. And I know people will go to UN to look up documentation. I'm like, what the frig are you doing? You never heard tell of a dictionary? You never heard tell of an encyclopedia? Why would you use UN for? It's 195 militaries. I don't see any anti-UN groups on the planet, which is bizarre as it gets, because it's uncontestable that they're absurdly, dangerously evil. They're asking the council to join the cities in the United Kingdom across the world to pass a motion supporting the ban and lobbying the government to start acting legally and stop investments in nuclear weapons. Again, they're not going to sign the pact. Because they'll do all that on their own if you sign the anti-nuclear weapons ban, right? But they're organized. There's lots of them. They're showing up all over the world. And they're bringing attention to the evil of nuclear. That's a win. But there's more to evil in nuclear than weapons. There's more pressing matters like the food from Fukushima. And we got a poll tonight to help articulate that to those who are not aware. And should countries that are importing deadly, vicious, monstrous radioactive food from a nuclear wasteland called Fukushima, Japan actually, have referendums on it first? And the reason they should is because 14 prefectures, these are big prefectures, and the growing capacity is half the country, was banned by 55 countries for a decade. Not Canada, but 55 real countries for a decade. And so importing food from there in the next thousands of years, particularly Fukushima prefecture, which is surrounded by prefectures that were banned by 55 countries. Do people really think that they're immune to this stuff? Or do you think you're going to turn into Spider-Mans and the Hulk and all kinds of freak? These things are just shooting dirty bombs everywhere, depleting uranium munitions all over your planet. The hell did you just come from? Oh yeah, I remember this. Dina. Environmental damage. Santa Susana in the United States produced 460 times more radioactive fallout than 3 Mile Island. But when the media says the worst accident in America was 3 Mile Island, it's absurd. It was really bad. There's several million people polluted. They produced a study and said we got the same dose as watching color television for an extra year. It doesn't work that way. And back then, color televisions were definitely bad, okay? But they're not in your body pulsing energy every second for the rest of your life. And you're not breathing it and drinking. And there was huge die-off of pets right after 3 Mile Island. So imagine Santa Susana. And now there's an extra 500,000 people within 10 miles of Santa Susana, which happened in 1959 because they hit it. It's still hit today. And there's streets and streets and streets in those communities where every child or every house has 1 or 2 children with cancers. And just endless types of cancers. People are waking up, but that's only in these little streets and communities. Just the government knows it's going on, refuses to acknowledge it because the industry can't handle another scandal. Uranium Royalty Corporation, we've covered them a couple of times, and they're the coordinators. And this is Yahoo Finance, of course, which is backed by multiple public relation firms over the years, to present at the 2023 TD Securities Mining Conference. This is a big deal. So if you really want to find all the scumbags, you got to get down there and take pictures and identify them. This is where all the scumbags are going to be hanging out in the uranium industry. But the reality of it is there is no renaissance in the nuclear industry. And so this is about fleecing the taxpayers, the governments, which were willingly fleeced, and investors, which are unwillingly fleeced. And it's been, prime example of that is, I can't remember the major media out there in Western Canada, which is a blessing. I should just move on because Globe and Mail, spot me day. Globe and Mail, scumbag Globe and Mail, which sold or pumped uranium stocks 3 days a week. When Fukushima melted down, it was once a week. After it melted down, it was 3 times a week. They're still doing it today. Convincing people that worked all their life and are trying to invest their money for their retirements into burning it all on uranium stocks because it's going to go at some point. You're going to make a fortune off it. And everybody lost their shirts. And all these people, it was disgusting. I called them up, one of the scumbags, and he went silent after that. We never heard from him after that. It was despicable. I think people like that should get the death penalty. And you would too if it happened to you, I bet. So this conference is going on January 26th, which is not tomorrow, but the next day. And these are incredible scumbags. There is no nuclear renaissance, so what are they up to? It's the world's only uranium-focused royalty. Using the word royalty is really interesting. And streaming company, the only pure-play uranium-listed company on NASDAQ. Well, like, NuScale is on the stock market, but they don't even have a reactor. So they got... It's really disgusting that they're doing that, where they put this company up there. It doesn't have a product. It wants everybody to throw money at them and hope that they come up with a product. It's a Ponzi scam, but it's exceptionally unnecessary and exceptionally evil. And then the arrogance to describe it as carbon-free nuclear energy, which is this mantra since 2015 we've been seeing. And now it's prolific. You won't find a single story without them calling it carbon-free nuclear energy. It's an agenda. But it's only the industry that does it. There's the casual people that write about it or talk about it are never going to call it carbon-free nuclear energy. It's the most... And carbon is really good for the planet. You can't have fungus or bacteria or insects or biota or birds or animals or humans or trees or plants The planet would be like the moon if you didn't have carbon. And nuclear is the most resource and precious resource intensive industry in history. It's absurdly, it uses only the best of the best metals. Everything's inspected 3 times. It's just shockingly intensive. And they're calling it carbon free. And then they changed laws in countries to only use carbon free. And of course, the nuclear, because they only describe 100 of its brutal attributes, is accepted by a lot of countries, including now. Since Europe, the taxonomy declared it carbon free last year, which was absurdness. It was 516 to 504 or something, right? It was split down the middle on the vote at the EU Parliament, which are people that are appointed, not elected, I might add, right? You didn't need an EU, see? You needed a country. When you joined a global dictatorship, you joined a global dictatorship. You lost your sovereignty. The most important, precious thing is, like, you can't have a one world planet because evil has infiltrated all of your assets worldwide. And they'll work together to make sure that you're enslaved forever. And they don't care about anything, including themselves. When they talk about deep industrial knowledge and expertise in the uranium industry, then they wouldn't exist if that was true, because they would run away. This is a dying dinosaur industry. Yahoo Finance. Earth's inner core may have started spinning the other way. Earth's inner core may have started spinning. Hey, big boy. How you doing, eh? So Earth's inner core, there's a lot of debate about this. Everything's a conjecture, everything's an opinion. Far below our feet, a joint may have started moving again. Earth's inner core, hot boil. Slow it down, dude. I'm thinking about my tea, see, and not looking at the screen. A hot iron ball the size of Pluto, which got decommissioned as a planet a few years back, has stopped spinning in the same direction as the rest of the planet. That can't be good. And might even be rotating the other way, research suggested on Monday. We live on a planet within a planet. It's liquid metal. Roughly 5,000 kilometers below the surface we live on, this planet within the planet can spin independently because it floats in the liquid metal outer core. Exactly how the inner core rotates is a matter of debate. Nobody's going down there, because scientists in the latest research is expected to prove controversial. Seeking to track the inner core movement, new research published in the journal, which doesn't mean nothing anymore, Nature Geoscience, analyzes seismic waves from repeating earthquakes over the last 6 decades. And the study's authors from China said they found that the inner core's rotations came to a near halt around 2009 and then turned in an opposite direction. So it takes a while for it to get back up to speed, by the sounds of it. We believe the inner core rotates relative to the Earth's surface back and forth like a swing. Like a pendulum? One cycle of the pendulum is about 7 decades, 70 years, for the core to swing this way, and then, meaning it changes direction roughly every 35 years. But that's just one opinion. And then previously changed direction in the 1970s, predicted the next about phase would be the mid-2040s. The research said this rotation roughly lines up with changes in what is called the length of day, and small variations in exact time it takes Earth to rotate on its axis. But Vidal published research last year suggesting the inner core oscillates far more quickly, changing direction every 6 years or so. And his work was based on seismic waves from 2 nuclear explosions in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Like when they done nuclear testing, aka nuclear war, they found out that water changed the structure up to 1,800 miles away in the circumference. 1,800 miles, water changed its structure. And so, like, the water that we're supposed to drink is known as structured water. And all life on the planet, so if you grow a plant in structured water, it'll come to fruit. You get 30% more fruit. It'll mature 30% quicker, 30% more foliage, and you can get an extra crop each year, right? But if you treat it with chemical, it changes the structure of the water. And unstructured water, there's a lot of different studies, right? And you can change. Scientists don't know why it does that. It's the only liquid that exists in all 3 forms: liquid, solid, and gas. But it's water, right? So like a plant can break up through pavement, for instance, which is like 200 atmospheric pressures for it to come out of the cement. Or it can do that, like a little seedling. It's amazing. And then water, they used to use water to crack rocks, they would drill holes down into the rocks. You would pour water down it and then cap it. In the winter, it would freeze and split the rocks, for instance, right? There's all these weird... Water is incredibly powerful, as you know, right? But anyway, structured water... And by the way, you're tied to where you were born by the water that was used to conceive you. That's the mineral of your body. That's the minerals that were used to create you. You're bound by that water. That water is very important for you. Now, we live in an environment where we put chemicals in the water and electrolysis to transport the water. That changes the structure of the water. The water coming out of your tap is not structured water. Water that's running out of a mountain, for instance, over all the rocks and minerals will reshape itself. And there is some debate suggesting that if you freeze water, right, you'll bring it back to its original structure, and when it thaws out, now you have structured water. And I truly believe that's a valid point. Because you can do it with an actual machine too. You can buy a machine that will change the structure back. But water coming out of the mountain, they also done this with cancer victims, where the cancer victims were terminal, and they took blood samples out of them every 20 minutes, and in between that they drank a glass of water. And then they took the blood sample to the laboratory right away, put it under the microscope, and you actually seen the blood start to unplate, and they start becoming healthy over several hours from just drinking structured water. And structured water is what you're designed to drink. It's super important that you always remember that. Try to take advantage of it when applicable. Another theory, which Vidal and some good evidence supporting it, is that the inner core only significantly moved between 2001 and 2013 and stayed put since. A geophysicist at the Australian National University published research suggesting the inner core cycle is every 20 to 30 years rather than the 70 proposed in the latest study. I got no idea what any of this means. Lacking something like a CAT scanner, images of the Earth's inner Earth is still blurry. Really? He said, predicting more surprises ahead, of course. But could include about a theory that the inner core might have yet another iron ball inside of it, like a Russian doll. These are all speculations. But the Earth is our atmosphere and everything is working because of the iron core of Earth itself, right? UK's not ruling out giving Ukraine missiles to reach Russia. And Russia's like really upset. Russia would never attack them if they had missiles that could reach their own country, see? Because neither would America. They're not going to attack somebody who can reach their own country. Because right now everybody's living in la-la land in Russia and America, thinking that there's no wars because they're not affected each day. Yeah, it's on TV, but it's not affecting us. And after decades of it, then you really start to believe that lie, right? UK not ruling out giving Ukraine missiles to reach Russia. UK is not going to do no such thing. UK is well, maybe they will. Who knows? They're incapable of repelling Russia. Let's put it that way. Would Vladimir Putin attack United Kingdom or America? Of course he would. He's not getting any younger. And they're at this, there's a lot of postulation. You got people like Bill Gates out there. How do we get rid of the majority of the population? And they got to go. Yet the military-industrial complex couldn't possibly be happier if that happened. And then you have the major organizations that are actually running the planet, like United Nations, which their entire foundation is based on stuff like that. Endless misery. That's right up their alleys. But many past, present, and current, leaders and key position so-called authorities, which means scumbags, have went to places like the World Economic Forum when they were young as part of the young global leaders. So Vladimir Putin, Justin Trudeau in Canada, and Angela Merkel, who finally stepped down, three of them were in power at the same time, were also young global leaders at the same time with Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum. Do you really believe for a second that that's not a coincidence? That's a coincidence, rather? Because it's not. That's engineered. And it's not just those three. I haven't got the list of them, but you'd be quite shocked to find out the conspiracy. To His Majesty's government, to ask His Majesty's government, Prince Charles, is the government. Get it? Despite the fact you say that monarchy is no longer in control of the government, Prince Charles got a long history of meddling in the government, right? What has Britain already given Ukraine? Well, this is quite shocking. Here's what Britain's already... I'm not going to try to go through it. It's actually way too much. What has Britain given Ukraine? Here's a list. Here's another list. We got a whole bunch of them. And here comes another list. And, here's another list. Wait a second. There's another one. No, that's not it. Here's another one. Oh, wait a second. Here's another one. Oh, yeah, wait, sure. There's another list. Yeah, and one more. That's a lot for just a single country. That's not a lot. That's absurd. That's a container ship. 5,500 transport truck loads of weapons. Do you really think the rest of the NATO countries didn't do the same thing? Do you think it's not engineered by the military-industrial complex, aka the World Economic Forums? We don't have limitless, and UN, we don't have limitless resources, Australia government finally admits, prepared to scale back defense projects. Well, when America went down there several years ago, set up a military base, there was a couple of hundred kids went missing in the first year, and they showed up in the brothels within a couple of miles of the bases. That's standard, by the way. So the Australian government finally admits, but they do got endless resources. They can do all the geothermal. They're one of the best spots in the world for geothermal. And solar, they got deserts coming out of their eardrums. They got a whole continent to themselves. That's irradiated by the UK, by the way. But there has been speculations a long-planned army project for up to 450 infantry fighting vehicles will be scaled back or scrapped, and that'll save them $27 billion. For 450 fighting vehicles is going to say, why would you, your country is just dying because you're burning all the money on something that you're not going to use. $27 billion for 450 infantry fighting vehicles? Hope it comes with a spare tire is all I can say. It's absurdness. Houses made of dung, cow dung, can protect you from nuclear radiation. Finally come up with a solution. I gotta go get me a cow tomorrow, man. Get busy making these bricks from cow shit. Now this is a judge, so don't go laughing. This is a judge said it. So there was a guy caught moving cows illegally. He got the death penalty for it. The Taipai District Court's additional session judge, while awarding punishment in a cows and bulls illegal transportation case, observed, science has proven houses made of cow dung can protect you from nuclear radiation. The judge pointed out that many incurable diseases can be cured by drinking cow's piss. That one I actually believe. And that crops grown organically can protect humans from many diseases. And that one I agree with too, obviously. The accused were found guilty of illegally transporting cattle, you criminals, and were awarded life terms for not death penalty, but life terms in jail for transporting 7,000 cows and 16 bulls. That brings my faith back in the judicial system for sure, Dana. 100%. Anytime. There we go. I was resurrected. We're back. Everything is normal. Nuclear reactors could be built in the Highlands after Freeport green light. Again, they're talking about small modular reactors that don't exist, signing memorandums of understanding for something that don't exist, and excluding everything that might show up and that is already here that is more applicable and way quicker to implement than something that don't exist. Does that make any sense anymore? I don't even think that makes sense anymore. You're not allowed to have a debate because, first off, it's not healthy for you. You'll go insane trying to have a debate about these people. A nuclear reactor could be built in Highlands after the green. What about geothermal? What about tidal energy? But what about geothermal? Why would you look at nuclear first and never at geothermal? How does that work? That's the nuclear industry stranglehold, right? Hopes of building the next generation nuclear reactors. How about the next generation geothermal? I think that's got a better ring to it. Or am I just being a ninny? Let's go back to the poll. That helps my brain sometimes. Should countries that are importing Fukushima deadly, vicious radioactive food have referendums on it before they decide to poison everybody in the supermarkets and corner stores and schools and everywhere else? Nah, that's craziness. Dana's making sense again. Make him stop. The householder. Corrupt, or not householder, that was That's a different story. That's Albert Haushofer. No, this is Householder. I'm thinking of Albert Haushofer. Have I ever told you the story of Albert Haushofer? Well, tonight's not going to be your lucky night, unfortunately. Oh, well, I guess I should tell it. I already brought it up. Haushofer was a geolog, a geologist in Berlin when the war was raging over in Europe, when Hitler was stirring up shit. And he got that job at the University of Berlin as a geologist, as a geolog, by keeping his mouth shut. And eventually he started having pains of conscience and started writing a little paper about how all of his friends, Jewish friends, were being rounded up and shipped off to jails. And he got noticed. He got a bit of a following, and then he got noticed by the Gestapo. And so they came and snatched him. And over in the Nazis would either hang you or shoot you. That was their preferred ways of killing you. But they wouldn't do it until he got a confession from you, a signed confession. Haushofer wouldn't sign the confession. So it was getting close to the end of the war, and they shot him anyway. And when they picked up his body, this little piece of paper, his confession, it was written in the form of a sonnet. And it was Schultz, which is guilty, right? I'm guilty. Yeah, I'm guilty, but I'm not guilty what you think. I should have Schafa, Unheil. I should have more sharply called evil evil. I put off my judgment for too long. And now I know what I'm guilty of. That's a true story. I should have Schafa, Unheil. Speaking of Schafa, guilty. Prosecuted corrupt plot to pass Ohio nuclear bailout, which is this guy here, which was House Bill 6, nuclear bailout legislation. They all do this, right? This was Householder, which would ding me for the story of Albert Haushofer, which is a fascinating story, really, right? If, it's hard to say sometimes whether the stories are true or not, but it makes for a good story anyway. And I sincerely believe it's a true story from my research. Otherwise, I wouldn't have remembered it, I'm sure. Ex-Ohio House Speaker Larry Householder flew to Arkan-based First Energy Corp's private jet to Washington. So they're not supposed to be taking free rides like that. That's conflict of interest, right? He used tens of millions of dollars from First Energy to build a political operation. And they wanted him as the Speaker of the House. And so they threw something like $50 million at him so he can build up these dark web donors and everything with the money that was thrown at him. Because you don't have to list down there who your donors are, see? So, which was obviously legislation that was changed so that the industry can just throw money at it till they got their own way. And so they were going to, I'm not sure if they did. Yeah, they did pass legislation to bail out 2 nuclear power plants that, all they were doing, they were stealing the money and the plant were running to the ground, right? And so this was just a way of bailing it out so they didn't get caught. And so what they done was, the lower people down the telephone chain got jail time. But now it's Householder's turn to go through trial. Now, he had diplomatic immunity at the time, but he's not in the legislative anymore, so now he doesn't have immunity anymore, so now they can prosecute him. And who knows what he'd done in order to try to mitigate that. But if you look at all nuclear bails outs, you're going to find the same Ponzi scam going on. Which reminds me of scams. We got a poll tonight. Should countries that are importing Fukushima deadly radioactive food from Japan have referendums on it for the citizens? First off, just to make them aware. Second off, they should put labels on it. But as Lang said at the beginning of it, if we put labels on it, then you'll become complacent. Despite the fact that there's over 300 foods out there that got to have, if they're in your ingredients, you got to put it in the label. Everything but GMO. 95% of the Canadian food is GMO. None of Italy, for instance, is GMO. And there's countries where it comes in, they'll burn it. They won't send it back, they'll just burn it. And they won't pay for it, to discourage them from shipping it again. Europe Freedom, half the American politicians voted for no GMO labels too, by the way. Canada's completely corrupt. We have no functional government whatsoever. Completely taken over by the industries in the 70s, and they've just gotten worse ever since. We don't have a functional media or university in the entire country, not one. Europe's freedom depends on Ukraine winning a decisive victory over Russia. So wait a second, what are you talking about? So if Europe's freedom depends on Ukraine winning a decisive victory over Russia, should Europe be shipping weapons to Ukraine? Should Europe be sending soldiers to Ukraine? Should Europe be bombing Russia? It's propaganda. This is what makes the industry and media so insidiously evil, is that type of propaganda. The international community seems to have understood that Ukraine must win the war, or at least that Putin cannot be allowed to emerge victorious. And this understanding is fueled not so much by the sympathy for Ukraine, because that's true, there is no sympathy for Ukraine, but rather by the realization that Putin's regime is a threat to the whole of Western civilization. Look, you're a threat to the whole of civilization. Putin is just another useful idiot for the World Economic Forum. And we can quantify that. China, Pakistan, and Russia nuclear test. I can't remember. I guess it doesn't matter. Sacked nuclear regulator board member Peter Becker wins court battle for reinstatement. That's South Africa. And so he was appointed by a high-ranking government official, but he's anti-nuclear, which doesn't make any sense that he's going to get appointed anywhere. I'm anti-nuclear. I don't see the government running to me. 4 years ago, there was a presidential candidate called me up and said that if he was elected, that he was going to hire me to be in charge of nuclear regulations and nuclear waste in the United States of America. And I was on the ocean at the time. I was just pulled into Prince Rupert to get groceries and fuel and stuff. And I was talking to him for about an hour. It was really, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He wasn't going to win by the sounds of it, right? He was an alternative. But he was running for the U.S. presidency, and he called me up to ask me would I work for him if he got elected. Well, I mean, they're going to hire 6,000 people. But he was trying to do the right thing, and he recognized that you put someone like me in a key position like that, we're going to get results. And we're going to need a couple of more prisons, because I'm going to get all kinds of them arrested. But he doesn't have those types of attributes, apparently. Matashi appointed Becker as a non-executive director of the non-regulatory agency to represent communities who may be affected by nuclear activities, which is every community in the country. But he got his job back. It took 9 months, which is really interesting too, right? That he actually got his job back. That's a rare win in the nuclear industry. Hey, come on, why are you so angry all the time? Russia-linked attackers target U.S. nuclear research facilities. Okay, well, I'm going to read the story. I know it's going to be full of nonsense, because it always is. And I read the story, and it's disappointing when I don't get anything tangible, and you get these salacious headlines, which are meant to which collectively will railroad a country, say. The recent attack, which is brought to our attention by Reuters, which has 1,800 medias regurgitating their narratives, same picture, same paragraph, with the same author at the same time type, highlighted how the Russian hacking group known as Cold River targeted 3 United States national laboratories. I was like, oh, let me guess, Brookhaven, Argonne, and Lawrence Livermore. These are all built on the biggest aquifers in that part of their countries that have been radioactive since the 50s, completely polluted, and are still today supplying water to the farms and the cities. It's so whacked. The reality of nuclear is so far-fetched. You know, I really should do a whole presentation on just the nuclear waste again, because I've done that years ago. And the whole story is so far, when you go through all of it, you can't actually do all of it in a single sitting. When you go through a whole lot of what the industry has been doing, the actual waste side of it, it's absurd. And I've gotten much better since then at this, right? I gathered up a lot more absurdness. For instance, you know, Hanford dumped 450 billion gallons of nuclear sludge directly into pits, unlined soil pits. Just into the soil, basically, and threw dirt over it. And this is a 585 square mile nuclear wasteland we're talking about. But that's equal, and everything flows to the Columbian River, which means that's drinking water for millions and millions of people, and it also ends up in the Pacific and out the Juan de Fuca Straits and places like that. Puget Sound, right? Comes out Puget Sound, ends up in the Juan de Fuca, and so now you're talking 10 million more people altogether. And so 450 billion gallons is 1.8 trillion liters. So if you built an aquarium that can hold this liquid, 6 feet wide, it's 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet. Or it's 84 trucks wrapped around the planet side by side, row after row. 84 rows of cars or trucks wrapped 6 feet wide, wrapped around the planet. Does that make sense to you now? That's just one. It's just one incident. And this is absurdness, the stuff back in the 50s, because they were learning, right? And they were dumping it directly into the Columbia River there at the same time. It's much worse than what I'm talking about, unfortunately, right? Currently, today, they have 41 miles of unlined trenches where they dumped it into. That's different from the 450 billion gallons that they dumped, because that one was in the 60s, this was in the 50s. So every time it rains, and they get a lot of rain, snow, and then you have, their summers are really dry, so they liberate a lot of the dust into the environment. But every time it rains, it washes it, where to? Directly into the Columbia River, which is right at their fingertips. The recent attack, which brought to our attention via Reuters, highlighted how the Russian hacking group known as Cold River targeted 3 United States' national laboratory. You know how they done it? The methodology was not particularly sophisticated. They just faked the sign-in pages and stole the passwords. So there's a couple of big problems with nuclear weapons facility. Shouldn't be online, for starters, because somebody's going to hack them. And second off, if this was the so-called, elite hacking group, they're not going to DOS them like that, right? They're not, or filching scams like this. It would have been a little bit more. So they've done it to themselves to blame it on Russia, is what I'm seeing. So they probably screwed up, going to websites that they're definitely not supposed to be going on, got viruses, and then try to blame it on Russia, so they can keep their shitty job poisoning humanity. NASA to fund nuclear rocket to blast people to Mars. Well, the first person on that should be James Hansen. Get him off the friggin' planet. At least do something good for a change. Australia Tech helping safeguard international fuel pools. That's what that fable is all about. For meteor age strikes, Dana. And tornadoes, Dana. Oh, yeah. Why didn't you say so? I should have known that was what you were talking about. Australian National Science Agency can soon play a key role in safeguarding spent nuclear fuel across the globe. I wouldn't trust Australian nuclear industry to protect, to put a band-aid on my arse from a bee sting. Like the nuclear industry in Australia are just the epitome of scum. They're the reason we have the word scumbag. Exactly, it was created because of those people in the nuclear industry. The robotized Chirinko viewing device was created through a collaboration between Sysro, scumbag Sysro, Data, and digital specialist arm Data 61. Hungarian robotic company DataStart and the international degenerate sack of shit Atomic Energy Agency. Why are they always so disgusting? And so the prototype system navigated a spent fuel pond. Well, the human's not going to go in there, despite the claim that they're going to try to make. Which are hemorrhaging radiation. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into your environment 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and an invisible plume, an invisible snowstorm of radioactive fallout. Invisible plume. Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing good tonight. Everybody just shooting up through the comments. Yeah, let's keep her going here. We're getting through it. Let me get back on track here. What's that you said? Batch chance in hell? Well, welcome to hell. You can check it any time you like. But you can never leave. Swiss Nuclear Trade Organization, the Swiss Nuclear, will later this year begin discussion with local communities and cantons on possible payments and compensation for hosting a nuclear waste site, aka deep geological repository. Well, everything is packaged at the surface before it goes into the hole in the ground. Let's call it what it is, hole in the ground. And why did you wait so long to get it from the environment? Because it's hemorrhaging. See, nuclear waste is splitting atoms all day long on a level the average person can't even comprehend. It's a catastrophic event, just a single fuel pool. There's 1,000 of them worldwide. Why is the world sitting in silent? Well, first off, we're talking about the World Nuclear News. You know, outside of the nuclear institution, the World Nuclear News is number 2 for degenerate monsters on our planet. They're absurd monsters. They're hideous, remorseless, vicious little monsters, right? And so they can give out money. Now, here's the repository. What's odd about this story? Look at the fake birds they got in the sky. This is a rendition of where they're going to put it. And they put birds in the sky. When was the last time you seen a flock of birds flying by? Fukushima killed off most of the species already. And what's that in the background? Tell me that's not farms. Don't tell me that's full of farms. What's the odds of a nuclear site being surrounded by farms, I wonder? Oh, that's right. Almost 100%. Because your food is shipped to your supermarket, which is going to be incredibly radioactive. It's going to be thousands of becquerels a kilogram. The organization noted that the payments and compensation are voluntarily payments. So you take whatever we give you and shut your friggin' pie hole. But no, normally they're pretty generous. If you're stupid enough to put a nuclear disease factory, why put it in the community? Why put it somewhere where there's no community? Is that like stupid idea or something? We've never heard them talk like that. I never heard somebody say, well, why won't you put it somewhere where there's no community? Why does it have to be in a community? Because the community's going to say no. And then they got to go look somewhere else. But, well, we'll hang out, we'll pass around a few $1 million, and then we'll go somewhere else in 5 years' time, see if they'll take it. Canada's been doing that for 18 years. It'll take them 60 years to build it, they said, and then they can start putting fuel in it. So meanwhile, take pictures of any species you come up on because you won't have them much longer. The organization has appointed a former diplomat. The very last person you want to put any trust into is a diplomat or a bureaucrat. Bureaucratic red tape is blocking the U.S. nuclear renaissance. There is no U.S. nuclear renaissance. It's not bureaucratic red tape. It's a dysfunctional industry. It's an industry that has been given too many chances, too many passes. And why do that to everybody and show a picture that's nuclear scumbag? Nuclear energy community was abuzz with news of a nuclear fusion breakthrough at the end of last year. No, this was a weapons breakthrough. Portrayed by the media, that was December the 13th, it was portrayed by the media as some nuclear renaissance. And the stocks went crazy on fusion. And then they went dead silent like normal. And everybody that invested lost their money, sucked up by the scumbag nuclear industry again. The ebb and flow of the nuclear, every 3 or 4 days, they got another of these Ponzi scams they push through. All the media goes out, oh, it's so wonderful, you should buy stocks at it right now. It's magic. The most toxic X-Men puts a stop to nuclear war. We covered that last night, kind of. That's another version of it. So toxic X-Men, Professor X, would like some credit for not being the worst person than he already is. That's how these people actually think, right? So they were saying the Professor X can stop all leaders worldwide from pushing a nuclear button and launching a nuclear war. So all the poor children out there that are reading this, their hero is a comic book instead of their parents or their grandparents or their aunts and uncles or cousins or brothers or sisters. It'll never be their heroes. It'll always be some stupid fictional character created by the nuclear industry like X-Men and Professor X and Spider-Man, the Hulk and Wolverine and Superman. These were all created by the nuclear industry and Simpsons to indoctrinate you into being complacent. And this, now they got generations of complacency, they can just do whatever they want. Everybody still lives in this fantasy that they're not responsible. Somebody else will do it. Doomsday clock may tick closer to midnight as experts warn of a nuclear war. Well, the Doomsday clock, you're talking about the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, right? Which was actually Einstein and Robert Oppenheimer were the original authors of this, right? And then the industry got on board. And ever since now, it's been the military-industrial complex on the board of directors. The Bulletin of Unconcerned Scientists, not atomic scientists, they're scumbags. And they are atomic scientists, in other words, scumbags. And they're put on a pedestal twice a week or so. They'll show up. They have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of contributors. The members of the executive committee is just a fraction. And their backgrounds are frightening. A former Axon consulting partner, these are infiltrated everybody's computers, that organization. Previous leadership roles included president of St. John's College. Why are all of these well-positioned scumbags attracted? And chairman of New York Stock Exchange Company. Before joining the Scumbag Bulletin, she served for 8 years as Chicago Counsel on Global Affairs. He served at, he got an MPA from Harvard Kennedy School of Government, amongst other degrees. He's a visiting fellow from Yale. She got one of her degrees from the National War College. Can you imagine what kind of scumbag she actually is? And they normally start out as good people, right? And they get indoctrinated, all kinds of money and all kinds of rewards for doing jack shit. All kinds of perks and credit cards and private limousines to take them. 3 times the world nearly ended in total nuclear destruction. Santa Susana, Chernobyl, and Fukushima. Unfortunately, Fukushima was real. No chance of global heating below 1.5 global heating, which is a word we hear, but not a lot. But we've been hearing it for the last 2 years or so. And you also hear it when talk about geothermal or geoengineering, aka chemtrails. You know, people say chemtrails don't exist, and like, what are you talking about? Do you actually have climate mitigation by breaking up clouds on stock markets? Those companies are. That, the chemtrailed Vietnam for 9 years with the B-52s converted. You really think they got rid of that technology? There's 136 ski resorts in the United States that chemtrail the sky to produce snow, have a license. You really think it don't exist? Must be nice. Must be nice to live in that fantasy. And then Bill Gates, who has no right to exist after all the crimes he's committed against humanity. Look at the guy shaking his hand, how stupid he actually looks. The former founder of Microsoft tells Sydney audience it is great to have Australia on board on climate. He's down there. Why is he promoting climate? And why is he promoting nuclear? And he's calling nuclear the solution to climate on top of that. School of Energy Resources announces proposal winners of nuclear-related research from the University of Wyoming. Is it Virginia? So they had contests to get the kiddies to come up with solutions for the nuclear industry, small modular reactors, so they can get funding to promote small modular reactors that don't exist and won't exist. It's about robbing the system and not looking at other technologies. It's about ignoring more appropriate technologies and getting memorandums of understandings so you don't look at anything else. So you can't have a future. Right? They're planning on not having a future. What does that tell us? Rare look at nuclear reactors inside a Russian nuclear submarine. A rare look. The war zone. Imagine what kind of scumbag would start up a site like that. Yay, we've seen inside of a Russian submarine reactor. Whoopie-doo. Can we get back to reality anytime soon? Like, first off, you can't fire I can't remember, they got like 16 ballistic missiles that can fire 8 nuclear projectiles each. So a ballistic missile has 8 different nuclear warheads. So they send it all in one package, then it splits open, you get hit with 16 nukes at the one time. But you can't cash a check ever again after that. No more poker night with the boys or girls. No more trips to the supermarket. No more hanging out on the beach. No more Wi-Fi. You kind of get where I'm going? Because the nuclear war is not as bad as the nuclear meltdown, but it's going to blow up a lot of cities. Nuclear meltdowns will kill us all anyway at some point. Fukushima has already sentenced us to a miserable future with no species. And again, you can't use the weapons, see? So why have it? Why waste it? And they've sunk a lot over the years with weapons on board, many different countries, America included. Canada's got 3 submarines. They're all at the West Edmonton Mall. It's the absolute stupidest. Why put weapons on them? Just put the bombs there with no weapons in it. You're not going to use it. And then when you screw up and sink it, you don't pollute the planet for another 1,000 years. Sizewell C considers potential to power Lido with waste heat from nuclear plant. We covered that, touched on that again last night. Not even going to touch on it tonight. What I am going to touch on is the fact that it's surrounded by farms. And if that don't concern you, and if you don't start asking the question, because people are there, we got to stop Sizewell C, which is great, but you got to stop the fuel pools and the farms. You can't build it there because it's surrounded by farms. And why can't we do that? Well, because then the food is going to be poisoned because the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation 24 hours a day at an amount that would terrify you if you actually understood it. I'm not going to take you down to details tonight, unfortunately. I apologize. But it's like an invisible plume covering the entire planet forever. All day, every day, from 1,000 different vectors. EDF, the Electric de France, scumbag France, Framatome seeks more time for Flamanville's vessel. It's 4 times over budget, $12 billion or something. It's a decade behind schedule, and they got more problems. That's the French, Dan. What do you expect? That's true. I never thought about that. France needs to study the impact of global warming on nuclear plant. Well, last year they ran out of fresh water because the glaciers are already gone, thanks to Fukushima heating up the planet. And they had to shut half their fleet off. Also, they had a lot of corrosion. And now they want to build 6 more reactors. How are you going to do that? You haven't got enough water to run the reactors that you got. They want to extend the life of all 56 reactors by another 10 years. And 6 of them by America got 60 extended by 80 years. So they're going to use that to justify extending all of their reactors, which are already admitted to be brittle from the neutron bombardment, and that they don't have the manpower to honor their contracts to build reactors in other countries, let alone in their own countries. And they don't have the manpower, they don't have the material, they don't have the supply network, they don't have the cement, they don't have the precious metals and resources to build a single reactor in their own country, let alone 6 more. No, the industry is just, you see it from every direction. The industry is working really hard from every direction to scuttle your future. That's the only thing they're actually good at, is scuttling your future. And a big pile of shit. That's what it looks like, look. That's the typical pro-nuclear. Big pile of shit, just like that right there. And promise you all these fantasies that'll never come to fruition. First off, because you don't actually need it. Second of all, it's just a distraction. It's just a distraction. Oh, I got a surprise today. Look what showed up. We ordered this on Friday from Amazon. Actually showed up on time. I was saying yesterday it's not going to show up. It wasn't supposed to show up until the end of the month, basically to the 10th of February. That's the fuel pump. And took 5 days, I guess. Yeah, less than 5 days to show up. And I ordered in the master control for the armrest 2 weeks ago, and that's still a week away because I'm sending it to my P.O. box. And so what I had to do with that, because it wouldn't ship to a P.O. box, was I got rid of the P.O. box, and then the courier delivers it, right? So it showed up about 5 times quicker because it's by courier. I was saying yesterday, because the updates didn't look normal, that, oh crap, am I going to have to get a refund and do all this again? Then it showed up this morning. We ordered it on Friday afternoon. It showed up on Tuesday morning, bright and early. That's 4.5 days, for goodness sakes. So I'm never going to order to my P.O. box again unless they force me to, right? Everything is always going to be directly to my home. Take the P.O. box off your order, they're going to deliver it directly to your house. It doesn't cost you anything extra. It was the same price to ship. Well, you couldn't ship it to the P.O. box, right? But it's the same price. Yeah, that's what that means. That means that we made it to the end of the show. I only feel mildly like a sack of shit. I'd take a painkiller to sleep last night. Which is extraordinary for me. And there's no way I'm going to climb under the truck and fix it myself. The ground is too soft. It's huge. I'm going to close the poll here in a moment. How's the poll doing? Countries that are importing brutal, lethal, Fukushima deadly radioactive food have referendums on it first. And they should. And there's no reason not to. And if you don't have it, you're going to be poisoned. And so they're not going to have it. They want to poison you. They don't care about... They don't covet life. They don't care about life like you do. And that's a fact, right? Stephen Young donated $50 last night. Thank you, Stephen. Hope you're doing a bit better, my friend. Yeah, I already tried. It took hours and I couldn't get the tank all the way out. And I hurt my neck when I done it too, right? I'm not set up to do a job like that. It's too awkward for a single person. Yeah, good night, everybody. It's pretty amazing how we breeze through so much news. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it's an entire day work for me to put all this together, to dig everything up, to vet everything, to go. You got to read it all, then you got to go through it a second time to screen capture it. And then you sit here at the end of the day and you tell the story, hopefully. Well, because there's so many things going on, sometimes after the show, I'll remember certain details I forgot to mention. Not all the time, but sometimes. And it bothers me. That's why I'm usually pretty focused, is because it'll bother me later if I don't include everything. Yeah, look, if you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Well, I'm going to come to a stop, get a fresh cup of tea. Hopefully I can sleep normal tonight. I'm going to have to pay someone to install it. It's leaking gas pretty heavy. I don't know if I should drive it anywhere. I better bring a fire extinguisher with me if I've got somewhere I can drop it off. I tried a couple places today. I couldn't find... because you got a backyard mechanic that's at this regularly can do it. And maybe tomorrow I'll get lucky and find somebody. But I know the garages are going to rob me if I goes to them to do it. They're just going to rob you. And frankly, I can't afford to be robbed by a gas station. and there's better alternatives out there I'd rather use. I'll find them, but it could take me another day or so to resolve it. Either way at all, it's not going to be cheap. Never is. I don't know how we ever keeps this operation from crashing, but we very fortunately do, and we're very grateful that we can. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Is Wednesday night. Today's Tuesday, I think. So tomorrow night, we'll see everybody same time. Hope you have a great night and a great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody. Take care. We'll see you soon. Yeah, good night, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Take care.